Hello and welcome to John and Letty's podcast. Today we're continuing with our series on the marriage workshop. And today we have a very special episode. We're going to be talking about sex in marriage.
Yes, I think this is such an interesting subject because there's so much. First of all, it's such an intimate thing that people don't talk about it often. And then there's so many misconceptions that you've heard or things that because people don't want to talk about it. So people come to their own conclusions, do their own things, or unfortunately find out about things from the wrong sources. For example, by trying to look at pornography or things like that and trying to figure out what sex is and how it should be enjoyed in marriage. But what we should do is we should go into its original design and intention. And that way we will be able to really have a proper sexual relationship in marriage.
And that's why when we talk about things like this, we go to the source, which is the Word of God. So where do we learn the things that we're going to talk about today is from the Word of God, our manual for our life. So that is what we're going to base everything that we're going to be talking about today.
Yes. And so the first thing that we need to understand about sex and marriage is beginning with the concept that sex was actually God's idea. Now, let me just begin with that because so many negative things are associated with sex. And there's a reason for that is whenever we go outside of the parameters that God gave. But sex was God's idea. And you can see it from the very moment that God made the first human beings by design. You can see by the design of the male and the female body that they're designed to be complementary in this sense. And what it says is that when God brought woman to the man, he says, this is flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. And then it continues and says, therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall cleave or shall be joined to his wife. And the two shall become one flesh. So this idea, this concept of the two becoming one flesh, and in fact, Jesus repeats it also, the two becoming one flesh really happens literally in the moment that there's a sexual relationship. So we see that by design of the human body, God designed it to be able to have sexual relations. The other thing is that the way that he designed it is for it to be something that's enjoyable. In other words, God designed the body so that when there is sexual relationship, it is enjoyable. You see throughout the animal kingdom and all that many types of animals reproduce, but they don't necessarily look like they're enjoying themselves. In other words, there's something with humans that there is a pleasure sense that God put in it. Now, obviously, sex is for reproduction, and that was one of the commandments that God gave, which is to be fruitful and multiply. So basically, there is a commandment to have a sexual relationship in order to produce and have fruit. But despite the fact that God designed it even for reproduction, he also designed other things among these for it to be pleasurable. And this is why many times it's actually misused.
Yes, and because it is misused, and even the enemy, even though it was something that was created by God, it was God's idea, because and I have heard you saying this before, that will be having a sexual relationship with your spouse is the closest that you're going to be with another human being here on earth. But the enemy has made it like something dirty. And even for culturally or in the Christian world, we don't hear a lot about sex, and in our generation even less. Now we hear a little bit more teachings like this, but in our generation it was something that was not spoken about. So we grew up thinking that it was something bad, when in reality it's something good that God made.
And even designed to be enjoyable. It was good. It was God's idea. He designed it and he put it. But there was a very important thing that we just read, or basically I was quoting, which is when it says that therefore the man shall leave his father and his wife, join and his mother, and join to his wife. So in other words, that joining to his wife comes within the context of a relationship called marriage. It is not under any other context. And in fact, every other sexual expression outside of marriage is considered sin in the Bible.
Yes.
And in many cases, it's considered a sin that will actually send people to hell. Now, the interesting thing is that today, people will say, oh, that's old-fashioned. Oh, no, this is just for enjoyment. You know, people that aren't married can have sexual relations. There's adultery. There's all this and all that.
And it's taken very lightly.
Casually.
Yeah, casually.
Right. Sexual relations is taking, people talk about hooking up,
Yeah.
you know, having sexual relations with somebody you barely know. But actually, a human being are body, soul, and spirit. And there is a connection, body, soul, and spirit when there is a sexual relationship.
Yes.
Therefore, the only place where this could happen and you're protected is within the marriage covenant. God puts a special protection when it's in marriage so that the two spouses can be together and enjoy intimacy. Now, something interesting is just in the natural. I mean, people who are promiscuous are exposed to all kinds of sexually transmitted diseases.
Yes.
So that's just an example, just in the natural, in the body dimension of how having sexual relationships outside of marriage have consequences. It also has consequences spiritually too.
Yes, and I was going to say another consequence also, that when people have sexual relations outside of marriage and they become bonded together emotionally outside of the marriage, and maybe one person is committed, the other person is not, it can cause a lot of hurt for people. So there is the physical connection, there's the emotional connection, and there's the spiritual connection also, since it's the closest relationship that you will have with any other human being. Whatever that other person is spiritually, it's what you will be receiving, or you will be partaking of something like that. So that's why the Bible also says that we shouldn't be unequally yoked. And it works. It makes sense also in the sexual relationship.
Right. So we see that sex and marriage is God's idea, and that it's to be something pleasurable, something that is to be enjoyable, and something that is to be happen in a marriage. So we see that it's good and it's designed, and it should happen in marriage. Now, one of the things that we need to understand is that there's also differences between men and women.
Okay. Well, there are differences because I think that men look at sex differently than women. For women, sex with your spouse, it's about an emotional connection, a deep emotional connection. Men are more practical. And so we are different. So in a marriage, having a healthy sexual relationship is a great thing because it connects the spouses at a deeper level. And also, it could also, backfire if you are not emotionally connected to your spouse. For example, as a woman, if I wasn't emotionally connected to my spouse, it would be very hard to have a fulfilling sexual relationship. And I think that goes for men and women. There has to be that deep emotional connection to have that very fulfilling sex life.
Yes. And one thing, this is one of the areas of difference is that men should pay attention. That sex, in a sense, having a sexual relation should be a part of, in the marriages, a giving and of yourself for the sake of the other. So this also happens, or should happen, in the sexual relationship. If all you think about is taking, or for you to be satisfied, then your marriage, your sexual relationship will not go well. And the thing is that you can use the sexual relationship almost as a barometer of the marriage itself. When you have a situation that there has been no sexual relationships for a period of time, like months, you know that marriage is in trouble. You know that there might likely be even infidelity in this area. For a man, the sexual relation is a very strong physical experience. So when a man is sexually stimulated, he's stimulated through what he sees, through his eyes, and this explains all commercials and all things, and all the clothing and all the marketing that is done to women and to men. To women, it's always to make them visually appealing. The marketing to men is to make them seem that they will appeal to certain kind of women. So all commercials have these women, beautiful women and all this, and everything is seductive. All of this happens because they want to stimulate the man's mind in that area. So we see that in a woman, there's more of an emotional connection.
Yes.
And there's not just that, but there's also that
hearing.
The hearing.
The things that you hear from your partner, from your
Exactly,
husband.
exactly.
So that's why we are so different. And what stimulates the man is not necessarily what stimulates the woman.
Exactly.
And to get a woman in the mood, and if you become romantic and you say beautiful things and stuff like that, that brings a woman closer to her husband. So
Yes.
what we hear is also very important, how we're treated,
Yes.
and that emotional connection that we're talking about.
Yes. And for women, basically studies show that it could take them a long time to be stimulated. It could take them like more than half an hour, say when the sexual relationship starts. But with men, it could be something very quick. It could be 5-10 minutes. So a man could you say, I'm done in 10 minutes, and the woman hasn't even started. So for this reason, we see that many women actually are very dissatisfied with their sexual relation. And so to them, it's not appealing. And as a result, there's frustration in the man because he has more of a need for has a greater sexual desire, because man has testosterone as a hormone. He has more of a desire, a higher libido than women normally do. And this is all general studies show this. So as a result, if the woman then doesn't want to, then it becomes a burden.
Yes.
Instead of something that's pleasurable and enjoyable to the two, it becomes a burden.
That's why communication is key in a marriage, and it includes communicating about this type of things, the sexual relationship. It's so important. Communication is the first step in becoming more emotionally connected, and then also being able to tell your spouse what things are appealing to you in the sexual relationship, what you like, what you don't like, because the last thing we want is for a woman to be sexually frustrated because her husband doesn't know what she needs. So as a woman, the woman needs to communicate to her spouse what she needs, what she likes, and the spouse needs to be able to hear. And that will bring a more fulfilling sexual life between them.
Communication then is very important, so that, and again, this is an area where people are not trained to speak. People are normally just quiet, or they just say, let's just get this over with or whatnot. But when there's communication, then it could be pleasurable for the two of them. In fact, this is one of the keys of how to have a good sexual experience, which is to have communication so that each one of you knows what things are pleasurable, what things are not or are hurtful, or even what things are annoying.
Yep. Absolutely. So if we are going to ask this question, and we have asked this question before when we have done marriage seminars and things like that, if spouses would like to have a more fulfilling sex life, and a lot of the times people say me,
Yes.
and if they want to know the secret for that, it one of them is communication, good communication, and number two is to not try to necessarily just satisfy yourself.
Right.
You have to think of your partner first.
Right.
You think of your spouse first, and once both are satisfied, sex is going to be much more pleasant, and there will be more sex in that marriage when it's a good experience for both of them.
Yes. And again, even though sex has to do with a physical joining, it goes beyond that. And just if you just are at the physical level of just joining, well, a man, say, could go out and have sex with a prostitute and say, oh, I don't feel anything or whatnot. But this is actually breaking the marriage covenant and bringing all possible kinds of consequences into the marriage.
Yeah.
So, but if there's the whole connection, the communication and all that, then you have a deeper communication. And what does it do? It'll strengthen the marriage. It actually, one of the things that it does is that it gives you grace, if I could use that word. So when things are not going well, You're more forgiving, you're more loving, you serve one another more, you think about one another more. And so that is very beneficial to
You say when
having
that part
good
is
sex
going
life.
well,
Yes.
it makes everything else in
Go
the
well.
marriage go well.
Correct. And conversely, when it doesn't go well, then there's
That's right.
friction in every other area of marriage. Now, these days, there are certain hindrances or problems to having a time to have sexual relations. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we find is that today people are very busy.
Yeah.
So we often have both the man and the woman working. If there are children, they're going to school early and this or that. So we find that there's such demand for our time that basically it's like almost midnight, 11
Yeah.
o'clock at night, when there's some time to see if there's some time to have sexual relations. And guess what? At that time, everybody's tired.
Yes, it's very hard to be romantic and have a sexual relationship and work at it. Like the time together and the things that go with it, because it's not just the act of intercourse, it's also the time together, the spending romantic time together, one another. And it's very challenging in the days that we live in, being a married couple with both working, raising children, busy with everything in life. But that should be a priority. And even with all of those things going on, as a married couple, they should count that as one of their priorities and find the way to do it, to
Yes.
have that quality time together.
Yes.
It's
Schedule
very
it.
important.
If you have to, even though it sounds
yes,
artificial,
yes,
it works.
It works. We have done it in our married life. We've been married for 35 years, and we have worked hard. We've been involved in ministry. We have grown children. We had little kids growing up, and everything going on. And we had to work at it for that part of our married life not to be discarded.
Right, and because of the importance of it. Now, another very large hindrance that's connected to today is we see first there's the busyness, the tiredness.
Yes.
But another one is that we live in a time of a lot of stress and anxiety. And part of this is the availability of so much media and so continually being barraged with bad news. The world is going to come to an end, that this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And you see the news, all you see is bad news. Well, this brings stress. This brings anxiety. How's the economy going to be? And as a result, unless you can relax, then it's very difficult to, particularly for the women, to have or experience and enjoy sexual relationship.
Yes, because when you are surrounded by burdens and things that tired you and stress you out, and everything is very hard to relax and hard to think of dropping everything to have intimacy. But again, those things are not going to go away. Those things are around. And as a married couple, if you put your sexual life as one of the priorities in the relationship, it will work.
Yes.
It takes work.
Yes.
It takes work. It might take planning. It takes, time to maybe put priorities in order. Maybe what is burdening you right now is not such a high priority as the relationship with your spouse, the intimacy with your spouse.
Yes.
So it has to be worked on.
Yes. And so for that also, it's good not to let extraneous things kind of get in. For example, at the time that you're trying to be romantic, it's not like time to think about
answering emails or
shopping tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's groceries, that the garbage needs to be taken out, that the house needs to be painted, that somebody's sending a text message or somebody's calling. All of these things can so interrupt as to make it impossible to have an enjoyable sexual relationship.
So I think we need to give some advice to some married couples. And I think our first advice would be that you need to work at this area of your relationship. If it's a good sexual relationship, then you need to work to maintain it. If it's not good and these things are not happening in your marriage, then you're in trouble, and you need to put some work into
Yes.
it to make sure that you have a successful and a pleasant sexual relationship with your spouse.
The other thing is that if you're not enjoying it, then you're doing something wrong. It's supposed to be enjoyable. And again, there, the area of communication that we discussed could be helpful to make it a pleasant experience. And again, remember, it's throughout the clutter of life, it's a time to separate a moment so that you can be together and then experience that intimacy that was designed to be in the sexual relations, the two becoming one.
And the marriage relationship will be blessed in all areas.
That's
The
right.
relationship with a spouse, the way that you feel, everything else will be blessed when you and your spouse are happy with your sexual relationship, with your sex life.
Yes. So we hope that this has been helpful to you and that it gave you a couple of things to think about, the proper boundaries of the sexual relationship, the benefit, the blessing that it could be, and how it can join you together. So we thank you for spending this time with us. And again, feel free to share this. Go ahead, subscribe, let other people know. As we continue, or this is as part, we do this as part of the marriage workshop. So thank you so much for being with us in this time, and we'll see you in another podcast.